district offices, team room and restroom facilities, and some construction costs and their related overhead are not eligible for the grant. Those items in the aggregate amount to about $12 million. The MSBA will give us a grant of 51.49% of the eligible cost. The town's estimated share of the project is between 50 and 58-60 million, and the state share between 47 to 49 million. The reason there's a $2 million range is that these estimates include $4.3 million in contingencies in the costing. We don't know how much of the contingency we'll spend or how much of the contingency will be spent on eligible costs. So that's why we've got a range in both what we will have to spend on the project and what the state will reimburse us for. But at a minimum, it's $47 million from the state. The average home in North Reading is valued at $450,100. And for that average property holder, the annual cost of the project will be $700. I'll get into a discussion on this in a couple of minutes. Our current tax rate is $14.38 per $1,000 evaluation, and this project will increase that by $1.55 per $1,000 evaluation, or about a 10.75% increase. Expressed differently, the project cost to the homeowner will be $155 per $100,000 evaluation. So by looking at your own tax bill, you can pretty easily estimate what the cost will be to you by using that $155 item. The next slide is the big question: how will this be financed? The project will be funded by a long-term bond of 25 years and what's called a debt exclusion. This simply means that the assessment to pay the debt will be excluded from the provisions of Proposition 2.5. I'm going to go into Proposition 2.5 in a couple of minutes because there is some confusion of how that works. As you're aware, interest rates are at historically low levels. The plan is to bond $50 million as soon as the project is approved, and to bond the balance of up to $10 million as needed during construction. This will allow the town to lock in the lower interest rates, which we believe to be somewhere around 4% on the majority of the costs. And we've estimated that the bonding cost for the balance, of the up to $10 million piece of it, will be around 5%. And obviously the timing and current financial markets will dictate the actual rates, but the advice of our bond consultants is that this is a reasonable estimate to use. The bonding will be a level payment 25-year loan. Level payment, if you think of your own personal mortgage where you pay a principal and interest payment, the same principal and interest payment every time you make a payment to the bank, that's the way this will be done for 25 years. We'll be making the same principal and interest payment. The estimated principal and interest payment will be about $3.9 million, as referred to as the debt service, and I'll be talking about that as we go on. We considered an equal principal payment with a declining interest payment, so that we would pay the principal over 25 years. You divided the principal, $60 million, by 25, you'd be paying $2.4 million in principal, and then the interest would be on the outstanding balance. This was determined not to be a terribly equitable way of doing it because it would have had a very high cost, probably close to $5 million as opposed to the $3.9 million in the first 10 years or so. It would gradually go down. It would start at that number and go down as more principal is paid, cross over at about the 10th year, and then after that, it would be less than the $3.9 million. We found this was not a very equitable way to fund this because the benefit of the project is going to benefit all of the residents of the town now and in the future. These buildings are going to have a life of at least 50 years, and to burden the folks in town now with a higher level of payment didn't seem to make a lot of sense. So that's why we went with a level payment, as I say, like your own personal mortgage. many people find confusing. I'll try to give some examples so that everyone can relate to. First thing to keep in mind as we talk about real estate taxes, there are two distinct things. The levy limit, which is the maximum amount of tax that can be assessed, and the tax rate. These are two separate things. There have been questions at several of our public meetings about how the tax rate is established and if the project assessment can provide a basis for a more permanent tax increase. And the short answer is no. Many years ago, the legislature enacted a new law referred to as Proposition 2.5 that limits the amount of tax increase without specific approval of town meeting and the voters. This is how it works. The levy limit, the maximum amount of taxes that can be assessed, is a function of the previous year's levy limit, in this case, the 36.042 million, plus 2.5% of that amount. So in the subsequent year, you could raise that by another $900,000. It can also be increased if there is new growth, new construction in the town, but it cannot be increased because there's a general increase in existing property values. So the levy limit is limited in this example to 2.5% increase. That's the maximum that the town can raise in taxes without getting permission, as I say, of town meeting and the voters. As you can see in the slide, the levy limit went up by 2.5%. In this example, the tax rate goes up by 2.5% as well. This is based on our current assessed value of all property in town. If the assessed values go up by 10%, for example, because buyers find North Reading a more attractive place to live, the tax rate would go down, the rate would go down by 10% because the amount of the tax levy has not changed. Only the base over which the assessment is spread is changed. It grew. Conversely, if the valuation goes down, the tax rate, not the levy, would increase. So the tax rate is a function of the assessed value as it is applied to the levy. The levy is controlled by all of us in how much that can go up. The next slide is another question has come up several times. It is what happens to my assessment for the school project? The value of my property increases in all other properties in the town increase. And the short answer is nothing to the dollar amount of the assessment. If you substitute the $3.9 million debt service for the levy limit that I mentioned earlier, the current valuation of the average property in North Reading is $450,100. The annual assessment for the school project would be $700. This is a rate of $1.55 per $100,000 of valuation. So assume that the property value increased by 10% to $495,100. Then the rate per 1,000 would drop to $1.41. The reason for this is that the debt service has not changed. It's still $3.9 million, and the base that is being spread over has changed, went up by 10%. On the other side of it, the property values decreased by 10%, and this average home went down to $405,100. The tax rate per thousand would increase to $1.73, but the taxes paid would still be $700, just spreading the same $3.9 million over a different base. The only time that this would change is if, for example, you made an addition to your house and nobody else in town did, to take an extreme example. Then the 3.9 is still going to be spread over the base of all the houses. Yours is going to go up, everybody else's will go down by the amount yours went up.
that's currently up. Total cost of the project, as you know, is $107,700,000. The MSBA share in their grant will be between $47 and $49 million. The cost to our town, $60 million. The cost to do nothing, to vote this down, will be $50 million. Because we have to do something with this building we're in tonight, in the middle school, up the hill. The no-bill cost includes accessibility improvements, the wastewater treatment plant, code violation corrections, fire suppression issues that will have to be addressed. The mechanical systems will have to be essentially replaced. HVAC, plumbing, electrical, fire. The no-bill cost of $50 million does not address the educational program deficiencies, nor does it address the modular classroom replacement, which you heard from Superintendent Willis this evening, that between this building and the building on the hill, we have 18 modular classrooms. The cost to replace are $150,000 a piece. That's the cost to vote no. To lay that out, essentially side by side, yes versus no this evening. Cost of yes, previously stated, $60 million. Cost of a no vote, $50 million. Cost of yes, we receive between $47 and $49 million from the state as a grant. From what you heard from Mr. Venezia earlier, is from sales tax that you and everyone in this room has paid that is now going to other communities. On the cost of no, there is no state grant that we can expect. What do we have with yes? 2 new schools, 21st century learning needs are addressed, as you heard Superintendent Willis, Principal Bernard, Principal O'Connell speak to earlier this evening. The increased science labs from 6 to 12, and as you heard Principal Bernard speak earlier, this building has 2 science labs for 49 sections of science. Cost of no, there will be limited technology improvements, no new science labs. 2 science labs for 49 sections of science. The beauty of this project, the cost of yes, no out-of-town relocation of students. Those of you in the audience this evening, if you had children that attended the batch when the batch was rehabbed and children were shipped out to Stoneham for 2 years, that will not happen on a yes vote this evening. Renovation on a cost of no. The plan would have to be to try to do the renovation while the students are in the buildings during vacations, but it'll be a tremendous problem in terms of phasing the project for the architect and the construction manager. And there's still a possibility that some of the renovation will not be able to be done with students in the building at all, and we may have to transfer students out. That'll be determined if there's a no vote. Cost of yes, no modular classrooms will ever be necessary in the 50-year life expectancy of the 2 new buildings. Cost of no, modular classrooms will be in use. Modular classrooms will need to be replaced that currently exist at a cost of $150,000 a piece. All accreditation issues will be addressed with the cost of yes, the cost of no. Renovation work will hopefully address the accreditation issues. Thank you.
I want the real ovation because I'm wrapping this up.